Hey, this is Waylon from Swiftwood Bows, and I want to do a short video here just showing how I put the serving on a string. A serving is just a wrap of thread that covers the area of the string that comes into contact with the arrow and with your arm, and it just protects the bowstring from getting worn. I use this nylon string. This is just simple nylon serving thread, number 4. They make all different kinds of products. Some of them are better and fancier than others, but this suits my needs just fine. I've got it on a little serving jig here that I got from Three Rivers Archery. It makes the process a lot easier. It's not entirely necessary. You can serve a string by hand, but the jig really helps keep things neat, consistent. It's worth the purchase if you're going to be making more than one string, in my opinion. So the first thing I do here, let me adjust the camera here so you can see what I'm doing a little bit better. All right, the first thing that I need to do, well, I got to make sure that I've got all the tools that I need. My pocket knife out here. So I've got a pocket knife, got my serving thread, I've got a little string of braided fishing line, about 6 inches long, and I'm just going to keep that handy. I'll show you how I use it a little bit later, and just got a pair of pliers in case I need them. So I'm going to start by establishing where I need the serving thread. If I'm gripping the bow right here, I'm going to be holding the arrow about here. So I want to make sure that I start well above that, so that I'm not holding the arrow right on the edge of the serving thread. There's a little bit of a margin, and then I want it to extend down far enough to go past where my arm's going to be hitting the string sometimes. So about from there to there. So let's start up here. That'll give me plenty above where I'm going to be holding the string. And to start with, I'm just going to wrap around so that I'm wrapping back over this trailing edge here. It's pointing towards the direction that I'm going to be wrapping. You don't have to worry about getting those first few passes super tight, because you're going to be able to tighten that by pulling on the loose end once you get going. So at first I'm just kind of doing the tension by hand. I'm not using the jig yet. So after I get about 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch down, I'm going to lift this string back out of the way, and I'm going to start wrapping around just the bowstring and not the trailing end. And then I'm going to get down to where the serving jig is tight against the string, and now I'm just going to be able to flip this. Oh, got to make sure that this doesn't get under there again. Now I can just flip this serving jig around and around, and the wing nut lets you adjust the tension. You want it tight enough that the serving jig is staying against the string, but you don't want it so tight that the serving thread is just going to be cramping down really hard on the bowstring. So I'm just going to keep flipping this thing, and it just travels down the string all the way to the end. Alright, as I'm approaching the end of where I want the serving to be, I'm going to get this other piece of string out that I set aside. So I've doubled up the string, so I've got a loop on this end and I've got the two tailing ends on this end. So I'm going to pull this down and I'm going to slip this string under the serving so that the loop is pointing towards my finished end. And now I'm going to start wrapping around. I'm going to not do it very tight. I want to keep this pretty loose, otherwise it's going to be hard to do the last step. So once again, I'm going to do about 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch. Keeping it pretty loose. Alright, that should be enough. Now I'm going to give myself some slack here. And take my pocket knife. I like to hold some tension on this string. I don't want this to get totally loose, and then I just cut the thread. Okay, so here's the trick. I'm going to take this end of the serving thread and I'm going to put it through this loop that I've left here with the extra string. And now I can take the two ends here and I'm going to pull them through, and it's going to catch this end of the serving string, and it's going to pull it under these loops that I've created. Now sometimes it gets stuck in there, and that's why I keep the pliers handy. We'll see if I can pop it through. There we go. Okay, so now I've got the end of the serving string tucked under this 1/4 inch of loops on the serving thread, and so now I can pull this and cinch that all down tight, and I can pull on this end and cinch this end down tight as well. Now the string has a serving on it. To take care of these loose ends here and to help keep this from unraveling, this is pretty secure in and of itself, and I used to drop a little bit of super glue on the ends here, and that's an option, but I don't like getting glue all over my string. So lately I've been cutting it so there's just a little bit of fuzz sticking off, and then really carefully taking a lighter flame just to this fuzz for just a second to turn it into melted plastic again, and then I just kind of touch it down with my finger. You just got to be careful not to get the flame anywhere near the actual string. So if you're feeling nervous about that, you could leave it as is, or you could use a touch of glue, but I prefer to use the flame these days. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to come back and show you how I establish a simple nock point where the nock of the arrow is going to rest on the serving string, because this isn't quite thick enough for the nock to fit snugly on. Alright, so let's put a nock point on there. So the most important thing when you're establishing the nock point is making sure that the arrow is sitting exactly like you want it when you're shooting. The way that I judge is I make the arrow perpendicular to the string, and then I bring it up just a little bit so that when I shoot, the arrow is going to lift off my hand a little bit and not not careen off my hand or off the arrow rest. And that's always gotten me good enough. And of course, if you start shooting and you don't like where the nock point is, it's pretty easy to do this over again. So I made a little mark here on my string just so I know where I'm putting it. So I make my nocking points with some dental floss. It's tough enough that it stands up to abuse, and it's nice and thin, and it's a different color than the serving thread. Works pretty well. The process for putting this on is pretty much the same as putting on the serving thread. I start the thread here, and then I'm just going to wrap back over that trailing edge so that, oh, sometimes it slips off. All right, so now I'm just going to make a spot that's wide enough to accommodate the nock of the arrow. And the thickness that you need is just going to be determined by your string material and your serving material and what the nock is. So right there, it fits on fairly well. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make one more pass, just because it gets compressed down a little bit. Now, when I go back to do this other pass, I'm going to use this same fishing line to help secure the trailing end when I'm finished. So I'm going to get that under there, and then I'm just going to start wrapping around that fishing line to establish a second layer. And now I just tuck this once again at the end through the loop. And then I pull, and it comes through all those layers that I just did. And so now I've got a nice tight nock point. You can see it snaps on nice and tight there. So it just takes a few minutes to do. It's easy to change if you need to. It's easy to change if it eventually gets worn out, but they tend to last pretty long for me. So you can just trim off these edges, and then just to provide a little bit of extra toughness, I do put a little spot of super glue on this, and it just kind of helps hold it all together. All right, well, thanks for watching. I hope that was helpful. If you guys have any of your own tips or tricks, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks. I'll see you next time.